I Survived Real Estate started just 4 years ago. For those of you who have been here for a long time, hasn't time flown? It's crazy. It started with a simple formula, a conversation and a cause. The last 4 years in real estate have been particularly difficult. If you're in this room today, I think it's fair to say you are considered a survivor, right? Long gone are the days of condo hotel investing in Las Vegas, a realtor in every household, stated income loans, and 10% price increases every month. True professionals working in the environment today stay on top of trends and challenges in all different facets that make up the market. Tonight, we've invited 6 special guests, all from all over the nation. Some have or soon will be representing their national organizations in Congress, trying to influence change. The conversations on stage tonight will hopefully give us a better idea of what to expect in 2012 and how our businesses might change. 100% of the proceeds tonight are going to Susan G. Komen for the Cure. We have blown through everything we've ever done in all the other years. We are this close to $80,000 this year. There's a lot of people who didn't know how it works. We've had a lot of walkers involved. The walkers alone this year raised $15,000. How you attended is the sponsors actually made a donation to our breast cancer walk team. We walked in a breast cancer walk about 2 weeks ago, and people actually joined our walk to earn a seat tonight. We've had more walkers participate than ever. We had over 50 people, and hence 15 grand. So thank you for all the walkers. A lot of them are up here tonight. We typically do this in September, but since we waited till October, we actually got to have a special guest and a representative of Komen. Her name is Rebecca Holtquist. Holtquist? Yes. And I'd like to invite her up here to talk a little bit about Susan G. Komen. Rebecca?
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and being part of I Survived Real Estate and also furthering the movement to end breast cancer forever, which is what you're doing together with me and the other advocates at Susan G. Komen for the Cure in Orange County. I'd like to thank you all for your support and the Norris family and Aaron for supporting us over the past 3 years. And I guess as of now, you've raised over $250,000 for women in need here in Orange County and surrounding areas. It's phenomenal. Thank you so much. You guys are pretty passionate here tonight, and I am too, and we've come together to further this cause, which is what I'm involved in. Again, I thank the Norris family. I also want to thank all of you here, specifically the real estate industry. I know you've all been faced with this down economy, and this event is specifically saving lives here in Orange County for women, and maybe some of you too that are in the industry but don't necessarily carry health insurance. And being able to afford a mammogram is not possible. I even have a friend who's recently diagnosed, and because she's under the age of 40, got a mammogram through the funds that Komen offered her from the funds that come from you people here tonight. And with your donations, you have become advocates like I am, volunteering and being a part of this movement. Not only am I a lifelong resident of Orange County, but I too am a survivor of breast cancer. Thanks. I was just 33 when I was diagnosed a few years back, and I was a mom and a wife, and I had 3 beautiful daughters. And if it weren't for a life-saving mammogram that I had that year, I wouldn't be here. It was stage 2 invasive breast cancer, and I endured chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. And through that, became involved with Susan G. Komen for the Cure. And I'm passionate about that because 75% of the funds raised that come through our doors stay right here in this area to help women in need through treatment, through clinical mammograms, and it all stays right here. So the funds that you are raising here are staying right here. Women, if you know someone who's in need, we can help them. We can get them the treatment they need. as an advocate for Komen OC, I'm here on behalf again to thank you, and I just want everyone to know, though, that early detection is what saved my life and what will save the lives of the future women. And through the science that we're funding as well, that 25%, I'm looking forward today when our daughters and our children and granddaughters out there, all of you here, live in a world without breast cancer. But it's because of you guys here raising those money and coming together as a community in your industry that we are going to be able to do that. And I just want to thank you all again from the bottom of my heart and from Komen OC.
As it has become a tradition over the last couple of years, would you please stand if you're honoring somebody that has struggled with cancer? That's always the hardest part. Thank you. George, can you go to the screen for a second for me? There she is. Most of you know the cause tonight has a very personal meaning to our family. Mom passed in January after a 17 very brave fight against cancer. The first 3 years of I Survived actually launched with a radio show between Mom and Dad, and I will forever be very grateful for this event because we've got 3 wonderful shows that show her, just her spirit, her stubbornness, her unwillingness to give up, her faith, and I'm just very grateful for you being here and sharing this with us, and it's just meant a lot to our family, so thank you. Speaking of support, none of this happens without sponsors that have taken a lot of time to be here tonight. I'm just going to mention the platinum sponsors right now so we can get on with the event, and after dessert, which is really good, I hear, by the way. I will mention the gold because we have so many tonight. ForeclosureRadar, Sean O'Toole, thank you for helping us out this year. Frye, Wiles, Web and Branding. HousingWire Magazine. Investors Workshop, Angel and Sean. investCLUB for Women. MVT Productions, who are helping us put on this great show tonight. Real Wealth. San Diego Creative Real Estate Investors Club. Bill, thank you. San Jose Real Estate Investors Club. Thank you. Geraldine Berry got 3 full tables down here from Northern California. I don't know how you do it. Magic. White House Catering, who's provided the lovely dinner this evening. And the Nixon Library. These are our walkers, by the way, that we walked a couple weeks ago, and a lot of them are sitting up front, so thank you so very much for helping us out this year. So, without further ado, if you could silence your cell phones, that would be great. If you're watching online, you don't need to do that. If you miss something, don't worry. We're going to have the show go online on the radio show, and we'll also put the video on our website. And now, I'd like to introduce you to the host this evening. He's been an active investor for 30 years and has been part of thousands of transactions as investor, builder, and hard money lender. He hosts a weekly award-winning radio show and spends much of his time researching things like congressional bills, bailouts, and economics. Sounds fun. I'm very honored to introduce my father, Bruce Norris.
Give me a second.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
And it's going to be in the back.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I need that for a moment.
Okay.
my. Thank you, guys. I'm going to take just a moment to talk a little bit about the most amazing person that I've ever known. Marcia Norris started every day by doing two things. She said prayers for everyone in her family every day, and she took time to think of all the things that were blessings in her life. The one thing that you couldn't mistake about Marcia is she was thankful for the smallest things. If you took her out for coffee, you never failed to hear thank you. And it was such an awesome example for our family. And Marcia was an amazing blend of stubborn determination and kindness. And I remember, Glenn, you said that about Marcia, and it's true. She had an iron will when it came to some things. And one of those things was dealing with breast cancer. She decided early on that breast cancer was not going to rule her life, that she was going to put it in a little corner and tell it to stay there. And there were times that she was afraid, and there was times that she was hurting, but that was dominated by, let's go on a cruise and let's go live a life. And if you have somebody in your life that has cancer, it's a choice on how to handle that. And we saw somebody handle it with such grace and dignity that it was amazing. The people in this audience put a smile on her face constantly during her 17-year journey with cancer. You guys sent cards, calls, flowers. Constantly, she received flowers. And just when she came to meetings, she felt your love. And I'm telling you, it was very touching to her. And if she could talk to you tonight, she would once more say thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me comfort and taking good care of me. So thank you. Let's see if this is going to work. Oh, okay. It's going to work. Tonight is probably, I think, the most important meeting we've had. It seems to be there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot of things at stake for not just investors, but collectively. Sometimes as investors, we think of ourselves as the lone Mohican out here, but all of a sudden, there's legislation that we're going to be talking about tonight that really deal with our entire industry and how it affects how people buy property and how much down payment they have to have, and et cetera. And so we actually have a common enemy with everyone in the industry, and it almost feels good. But on the other side of it, there's a lot of things going on in the world that I never thought I would have to think about as a real estate investor. And so all of a sudden I find myself staying up late at night watching Europe and see if Greek is going to default or something. And honestly, it's one of the tasks tonight for the economist. And by the way, no one knows any of the questions I'm going to ask them. And I think I want to let you know that there may be a question I ask that someone doesn't know the answer to. That's perfectly acceptable. You know, we have to honor the fact that sometimes I'm asking stuff I don't know, to be honest with you, because I'm trying to find out myself if something's going to be happening. The goal of tonight is to kind of bat it around with people at the top of an industry. And we have to have a lot of respect for the journey that it takes to have the positions that they have. It's really a lifetime commitment to get to where they are. They've dedicated themselves. And so we have a lot more in common than different. And tonight we're going to try and see if we can't make some suggestions that make a difference in all of our lives and all of our businesses. And that'll be a good outcome for me. I can't tell you how many hours of preparation I've done, because you're never done. And that's one thing that finally today, I had missed karate for 3 days, and I actually really miss it. And I wasn't going to go this morning, but I decided to, and I feel really kind of relaxed. You said that would be true. and it was. You know, there's only so many books you can read, but I've read probably 500 pages a day for the last week, because it was new stuff. And so I can just tell you I'm as prepared as I can possibly be for the questions that I'm going to ask. I want to go through a little bit of a presentation because it'll kind of set the tone of where we are in California. There's a lot of new people in this audience that hasn't seen this. Some of the regulars are probably saying, I've seen this so many times. So just bear with me as I go through this and talk about where we are in California, why we have some of the problems we have, not just in California, but nationally, and then maybe what we're going to be able to do about it. For a lot of the people in this audience, and by the way, this is a very diversified audience, so I'm going to ask, how many people are investors? Let me see your hands. Okay, now that's a very different number than it was 3 years ago. That would be 90% of the audience. How many people are real estate agents and mortgage brokers? Okay, I mean, that's a lot of people now. Escrow. I have to honor our escrow, come on. All right. And appraisers. Appraisers? All right. So we have a very diverse group of people. Now, this is a property that we actually bought. This property sold at the peak of the market for $436,000 in Moreno Valley. About 2.5 years later, we bought it for just a tad less, $64,000. We put $35,000 into it, and we rented it out for $1,400 a month, and I still have this property. Now, when we fixed it, we turned it into that. That's how we fix our rentals. So one of the things that I want people to realize is sometimes there's just an assumption that when you have rentals, then you are a slumlord. Well, I beg to differ, and the reason why we do this to rentals is, guess what? We don't have any competition because no one's going to put granite in their rentals except if you think like us. And the way we think is we're going to get the best tenants, we're going to get the most applicants, we're going to get the least people to move out, and labor's on sale right now, so we decided to fix everything really nice right now. And so sometimes cities are worried about, oh, there's too big a percentage of rentals. I would say there's a lot of people in this group that fix them the same way. And so you don't have to be afraid. But one of the problems is that someone bought that house across the street for $436,000, and they still owe $436,000. Now this house may be worth $150,000 or $170,000, but therein lies our problem is this chart. We have a very large percentage of people upside down. So in California, we have about 30% of the people upside down with another 4 or 5% very close. And that is a big problem, and some of the cities are way worse. And I picked this particular city because it's the worst one I could find. This is Hesperia, and if you look at on the right-hand side, Aaron, do I have a pointer? I'm so afraid to push a wrong button. Anyway, the dark color represents 200% more. You owe twice as much as the house is worth or more. Okay, so 9,000 plus households are in that situation. 5,793 owe 120% to 200%. So you add all that negative up, you got 76.9% of the people in Hesperia who aren't going anywhere. They can't move up, they can't move out. That's a problem when 76% of your city is stationary and can't go anywhere. And that's an extreme example, but the whole state has got some problems. One of the things that's occurring is that we're having decent volume in sales in California. This is a historic look at volume in the brown line. And so 2010, about 500,000 sales. 2011 is very similar. What's the difference is the mix of sales. If you look at the mix of sales, and this is from the California Association of Realtors for August of 2011, is that you've got about 43, 44% of all sales either being short sales or REOs. And if you think about a short sale or an REO, the person that leaves that closing has damaged credit. They are not buying another house. You have just lost 43% of your former owners to non-ownership status. That has never happened before. Now that's the average for the state of California. You go to some areas like Riverside where it's 65%. 65% combination of short sales and REOs is what's going on in Riverside. So for every 1,000 sales, 650 buyers no longer emerge as an owner-occupant. They have to either be sold to an investor, or you have to have people migrate into the area new. Well, in Riverside, we have about a 15% unemployment. The likelihood of them showing up is not as good as it once was. And so this is the dilemma, because we have some dominoes to solve. And one of the things I'll be asking up here, and as we will probably put our heads together, is how do we fix unemployment? Because in our area, you don't fix unemployment without fixing construction. You can't fix construction until you have a price per square foot that makes a builder a profit. And we are a tad away from that. And so we had better figure out how to move a lot of properties to another group of people. This is from CAR as well. Portion of sellers planning to repurchase. Look at that chart. Something like 37% of people, when they close escrow, are saying, yeah, I'm going to buy another one right away. You have the damage group, but you also have the people that are mentally just kind of beat up. You know, I just closed escrow. I used to have a $400,000 house that closed for $190,000. I don't know if I want to participate in another one right now. And so you really have this lag effect that goes on when you're not too excited about real estate. So consequently, what's going on is the cash sales have exploded. So you have people that are in this room buying properties. The problem is, when we buy properties for cash, eventually we run out of cash, and what do we have to do? We have to shove that same property in a better condition on the market. So instead of being able to back up the truck with the REOs and say, okay, let's unload a lot of them, you're constantly competing with very nice inventory that's coming back around. If we could get financing, so we wouldn't do that. And that's part of what we're going to talk about tonight. 33% of loans in foreclosure have not made a payment in over 2 years. This chart reflects that people who haven't made their payment in a year or more, 41%. So we're letting people stay in foreclosure for a long time. I'm sure there's people here that know people that have been not paying a payment for a long time. There was even a news article in the Riverside Press where there was a family being interviewed, and they were actually pretty delighted about how their lifestyle has changed since they stopped making their house payment. No kidding. They said, life is so much better. We have extra money for the business. We went on a vacation. We bought a barbecue. It was a portable barbecue, too, by the way. They could take that puppy if something... But eventually, you know, this inventory might show up. This is the ball of inventory that's churning behind the scenes, 90 days late, all the way through properties or they're already foreclosed, is 4 million properties. It's about 8% of all the inventory in the country. So if you think this is over with, it's not. It's just in some form. And one of the things I'll probably ask tonight is why we're letting that happen. Why is that the best strategy that's going on? One of the things that is happening right now, and I think this is important for all of us in the industry, is there's trying to be a retooling of our minds toward ownership of homes. This is a front cover article, for the Time magazine, Rethinking Home Ownership. But the explanation kills me. Why owning a home may no longer make economic sense. They could have said anything else but that. You have half price real estate and interest rates at 4%. And that's economically a bad idea. I want you to call up your landlord and see if you can get a 30-year fixed rental rate. That isn't going to happen. So it's not economically infeasible. It's actually the smartest thing you could possibly do. But what's interesting is we've decided that media-wise, so we're going to say that maybe owning a home, since it's damaged so many people just recently, maybe we've had it wrong all the time. I'm going to tell a personal story because to me, this is really what America is about. I got married at 17 to Marcia, and I didn't catch on to work very well. I got fired 5 times very quickly. So I was ticking people off. I didn't know how to disagree with an owner is what it amounted to, part of it. I would be, no, I don't agree with that, and then I was gone. The first time I came home with cash, Marcia was really happy. After that, she knew that was severance pay. When we were 21, we had a chance to buy a home in Miraloma, and I had sort of rectified my problems with working, and we bought a house. We didn't know what we were doing. The toilets flushed the wrong way. The windows didn't work. The Sunday morning that we fixed Sunday dinner, We had a window, not an air conditioner, but some kind of swamp cooler. And we started it up and it coughed dirt all over our Sunday dinner, so we had to go out. But the next day, I got to mow my own grass for the first time. And I've got to tell you that it was the first day I felt like a man. That was true. That's what ownership meant to me, a transformation. I don't want to see our country lose that. I really don't. This is a gentleman that... Thanks. This is a gentleman that we were able to talk to in Washington, D.C., and I really liked him, Raphael Bostic. I don't like this statement. It says there's a notion that being housed well is synonymous with being a homeowner. That narrative has got to change. I don't ever want it to change. I want investors to get financing, but I don't want us to buy all the houses by any means. I just want us to be allowed to assist to get this back to a normal market. This is an interesting comment and one we'll talk about because I think because of this attitude being prevalent, we have challenges coming down that we shouldn't have. This is from Sheila Bair, the former chairman of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. Clearly there's a strong correlation between the amount of skin in the game a borrower puts up front and how the loan performs. And it's only common sense. Did you put 20% down? You're committed to that house. You walk away from that house, you're going to lose a lot of money up front. So based on its common sense, we now have a challenge for laws that are in process for 20% down being mandatory for the best rates. What if that thesis is wrong, by the way? What if 20% down doesn't get you a better record for avoiding foreclosure? This is a 25-year chart for foreclosure rates. And if you look at starting at 86, we had a boom in real estate prices in 86 to 90, and then we had a downturn, the worst downturn we ever had. You cannot distinguish a foreclosure rate of a nothing down loan, a VA nothing down loan, an FHA 3% loan, a 20% Fannie Mae loan. You can't distinguish it. And the lowest one, historically, happens to be a VA nothing down loan. If you go all the way back to the 50s, that's the highest performing loan. And one of the reasons you know they performed is this is the national price in gold. We never had a price decline nationally. Whatever we were doing was smart policy until early 2000s. Whatever we did after that is what we should correct. Whatever we were doing before that, we should go back to. But one of the things that happens is we're not in the mood to just fix, we have to revamp. This is from Sean O'Toole, and this is his chart of how prices escalated beyond where they should be. And we started doing, first of all, we had interest rate drops. When people couldn't qualify, we gave them interest-only loans, then pay option loans, then stated income loans. And I guess we finally figured out that we probably shouldn't let people tell us what they make to get a loan. And it probably won't happen again. That's okay. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about just for a few minutes is an investor. And it's hard to get investor financing because, and I'm not sure exactly why, but this is a loan program that we have at the Norris Group. How many people have borrowed money? Not enough of you, apparently. Come on. We funded $15 million of this loan at 9.9% interest, and that red circle means that every loan is current. And the interest rate is 9.9%. So I think they're afraid to loan to the wrong group of people, and I really think there's something connected to investor/speculator, but that's not who is in this room. This room is filled with investors that just want a chance to buy something and keep it. This is basically our qualifying criteria for that success. We look at credit, but we don't make it the determining factor. The after-repaired market value must be supported by comps. Payment must be supported by comparable rents. So we're making rational decisions. We're not loaning somebody with a payment of $1,200 when the rents are $8. It's going to be at least the opposite of that. People have money down, and that's investors expect they're going to have cash or skin in the game, and they have to have cash reserves. Put together a national program like that, you'd have the best securitized paper in America. You really would. The effects of the current lending policies on investors, it limits the ability of full-time professional investors from assisting in the housing recovery. We did a survey. In this room, we would buy thousands of houses if we had financing, just here. And that didn't surprise me at all. It also prevents the beginning investor from creating wealth for their families. I have a feeling that Social Security, Medicare may be different in the future. One of the ways that it might not matter is if we can create our own wealth, and that would be a way to do it. It prevents 1031 exchanges where financing is involved. So you already have 12 loans, you have properties in another state, you want to come back home to California, you cannot do it. And I think one thing, it encourages bulk sales to the same people who caused the problem in the first place. I think one of the things they're considering with that big red circle is let's sell a whole bunch of houses at a time to hedge funds. And I really hope they don't do that. I really don't, because I don't think that solves the problem, and I think the local investor would do a better job. Temporary solutions, increase the number of loans available to qualified investors to an unlimited number for just 3 years. Give us a little window of 3 years and let us help. FHA had a loan program called 203K where you could get the purchase and the repairs built into a loan, make that available again. That was around in the 90s. And everything, by the way, that's being suggested used to be there. We already know how to solve this. We just have to go back to programs that worked. Allow simple assumptions of any Fannie, Freddie, or FHA loan for the next 3 years. And a simple assumption was you just wrote a check for a very small assumption fee without paperwork. In the 1980s, we had this ridiculous interest rate, 17%, 80, 81, 82 is really a terrible interest rate. But you didn't have any price decline, and that was because 60% of the transactions happened because no one needed another new loan. They were able to take financing from the past and bring it forward. That would be very smart to remember that that works. Allow equal access to all government-owned inventory for investors and owner-occupants alike. And probably if we have a lot of rentals, make a reasonable cash reserves. This is the last slide, and this is not just the only place that this is occurring. The Cal Poly Pomona and Michael Carney, who is here, has put together a study, and one of the most unique things about it is that they keep on appraising the same property year or every 6 months and have done it for decades. So it's not like a median price, it's not a Case-Shiller index, it's actually what this address was worth over the course of decades every 6 months. So what I did is I just took Lancaster and Palmdale, 2 properties apiece, and I took a look at the square footage they went for in 1990 when they were just about brand new, and they sold for $83 a foot, and now those properties, and I don't mean sold, they appraised for $83, they now appraise for $74, so you lost 11% in real dollar terms over 20 years. Now, let's convert that to the payment that's necessary. Your payment would have reflected in 1990 a 10% interest rate, and today it's 4%. So you have an 11% price discount, you have a 60% interest discount, and you're making more money in that area in 2011 than you were in 1990. You put that all together, you're buying that house at a 70% monthly discount. Which brings up the fact that maybe we need a nothing down loan program. And I wasn't going to mention that, but what the heck, here I am. I know one of the problems is some of this is very politically difficult to sell. Common sense sometimes doesn't sell politically. But we do have a very large group of people that the only reason they don't own a home, they don't have the down payment. And if you look at a historical chart, I think you could let them in at this payment rate and make it be okay. If they fail to make the payment and someone else can pick up the payment without really qualifying, but they just write a check and make it current, I think that solves 99% of the foreclosures. And if you go to a trustee sale eventually, just for this new loan program, let the opening bid be the late payment. Everyone in this room would buy the remaining properties and take over that loan subject to. So you'd have a nothing down loan program that would feed huge volumes to get the owner occupancy rate, and it's legit. It's not phony. I don't think we need to create anything that's bad paper or, wink at this foreclosure, it's okay. I don't think we can do that. But I think we can think out of the box or go back to where we were before and say, you know what, we already know how to solve this. Just get the politics, get out of the way, and let us do it. Anyway, so that's the presentation I wanted to do, and now we're going to take away this, and I'm going to introduce our first three. Well, I'm going to introduce the first two. Aaron, do you need help? I'm going to invite Duncan up here. Doug is the chief economist of Fannie Mae and also the vice president. He's responsible for managing Fannie Mae's. Go right ahead. You're early, though. It's okay. I knew he was going to be a handful from the start. He's responsible for managing Fannie Mae's strategy division and economics and mortgage market analysis groups. In this leadership role, Doug provides all economic housing and mortgage market forecasts and analysis and serves as company's thought leader and spokesperson on economic and mortgage market issues. And we had the pleasure of being back to Washington, D.C. in a meeting that I'm sure you were responsible for, and Howard Blum and Tom Wilson, Sean O'Toole, and myself were honored to get a chance to represent our industry. And I don't know if we accomplished a thing, to be honest with you, but we get to say for the rest of our life we went there anyway. Okay, so thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. And next I'm going to introduce Sean O'Toole. Prior to launching ForeclosureRadar, Sean successfully purchased and flipped more than 150 residential and commercial foreclosures. Leveraging 15 years in the software industry, Sean used technology as a key competitive advantage to build his successful real estate investment track record. And now he's passed those advantages on in ForeclosureRadar.com. And it's honestly the best $50 you could spend in the industry is getting into his website and figuring out $50? You got to be kidding me. All right, Sean, thank you. I'm going to let you have a job to do.
Okay.
I'm going to let Sean introduce Eric.
Next, let's see if I'm on yet.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. So the next panelist, Eric Janszen. Hope you can't hear me.
Move it up.
Number 5. Hello.
It's attached to my
Oh,
chest
there we
there.
go. All right, here we go. Wait, I think they got me. All right. So the next panelist is very special to me. I spent 15 years in high tech before getting into foreclosures, and I was always looking for people that I thought had good insights. And there was a gentleman that wrote articles for this little kind of niche-y thing called Always On. And every time I literally would wait for this newsletter to come because I just thought these were so insightful and important. And Eric Janszen spent 20 years in the high technology industry, did 2 stints in software startups as CEO, and then moved on into venture capital. And it's important to know that ForeclosureRadar wouldn't have existed without him. He recommended getting out of the stock market in 1999, which I did. He recommended buying gold in 2002, which is pretty close to what I did. He figured out there was a housing bubble going on, and that I benefited from while I was flipping foreclosures. He also, unfortunately, I didn't know Bruce yet, and Eric's the one who advised me to get out of the housing market at the end of 2005, which I did, and which was really the start of ForeclosureRadar. And there's more. In September of 2008, he told me again, get out of the real estate market. And not only did he tell me, but he told thousands of folks that follow him on his website, iTulip, which he started in the 90s to warn people about the dot-com bubble, and brought back to warn people about the housing bubble. So with that, I'd like to introduce Eric Janszen.
Thank you. Everybody's strategically placed.
Yeah.
I forgot the headgear this year. I'm sorry.
And the
Last year I had to bring headgear because Sean got out of control, and we just... I'm going to start with Doug. Doug, every night, first of all, you're in front of an audience of people that buy houses that either want to keep them as rentals and they're going to resell them sometimes and do that quickly after they bought them. And I guess I just want to talk about the economy that I watch and even the world that I watch it in. I now have the habit of staying up till 11 or 12 o'clock at night just to watch to see if there's a Greek default or what's going on over there, because there seems to be a correlation. And so I guess I wanted to start with, do you think there is going to be some kind of default in one or more of the countries over there? And then if so, what will the ramifications be to us?
Sure.
Easy question?
Absolutely, with certainty. First, just let me say thanks for the invitation to come and join you. It's an honor to be at the event.
Thank you very much.
Participate. And you're right, it was a pleasure to have you come to Washington, represent the case. We'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Okay.
Mike Williams, our CEO, has a quarterly meeting with all the staff at Fannie Mae, and he had me lead off the first 10 minutes of his hour-long session with an update on the economy. So one of the opening remarks I made was, you could look at it as the frat house party side effects. 11 million Greeks party into the night and bring down the global economy. Targeting the 25 to 35-year-old bracket. We do believe that that's one of the primary risks that face us today. Our current forecast, which is available to all you to the extent that you're interested, is on the Fannie website. You can pull it down about the 15th of every month, take a look at what we think. So I can't avoid accountability. And we see growth in the third quarter as being decent, maybe upwards of 2.5%, but then receding back to under 2% through the end of 2012. One thing that we believe is certain is Greece will default.
Okay.
We believe that's 100%. The question is, will they default in an orderly manner or not? In other words, will there be a plan for managing the losses and how those losses are going to be distributed? If it's orderly, so that the banking system is recapitalized while that default takes place, the likelihood of putting the U.S. certainly into a serious recession is low. If it's disorderly, then that's one of the primary risks that we see facing our own economy. Europe is our biggest trading partner.
Right.
China is actually second, but China is Europe's biggest trading partner. So if there is a disorderly default and Europe goes into recession, one of the things that's been keeping us growing has been the export business, and that will recede, and then we'll likely get a recession.
Okay. If we go into a recession, do we have at our disposal the normal monetary tools that we usually have?
My personal view is that the Fed has pretty much exhausted the tools that they have from a monetary policy perspective.
Which is, what would be the basic one that they would use?
Well, certainly the rate expectations, and they've made an explicit statement, which is highly unusual for them, that they're going to keep rates low through mid-2013. Interestingly, the general public actually understands that. Our surveys of consumers last month, subject to that Fed announcement, the percentage of people who expect rates to rise fell 12 percentage points. What a surprise. The public actually is paying attention, right? You know,
one thing I think it did, unintended consequence, if you're a house buyer.
Why hurry?
Why hurry?
Exactly.
I think that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, exactly. We would agree with that.
Okay.
So you'll see our expectation for sales is that they're flat.
Okay. If you don't have monetary policy to help out a recession, what do you use and what do you do?
Well, you'd like to suggest that you'd use fiscal policy. But our survey consumers give some information there as well. We do 1,000 phone calls a month, doing that for 16 months. In July, we were making the 1,000 phone calls while the debate on the debt ceiling was taking place. So the percentage of people who said the economy is going the wrong way rose 6 full percentage points during that month. Then it culminated at the end of July, so we polled in August, the first 3 months, wondering whether or not the full effect of that debate had taken place, and the percentage of people thinking it was going the wrong direction rose another 8%, so that at that point, 78% of the people in the country believe it's going the wrong way. That's a function of fiscal policy decision-making in Washington. So they're watching Washington's actions with one eye and watching Europe melt down with the other eye and saying, if we don't act responsibly in this space, that's our destiny. 78% of the people think that we're going the wrong direction in that issue.
I think sometimes it's a little hard to take maybe the end result that may be inevitable at some point seriously, because we got a credit downgrade and then we have an interest rate decline. And you don't connect those two dots. You think, oh my goodness, we just had our rate lowered, so now interest rates are going to be more expensive. And I have to say that this would have to be the first time in history this is a headline of an article, interest rates back over 3%.
All right.
I mean, so that's the damage. And
exactly.
When they use fiscal tools, and I think I'd like this to go to both of you, do they usually think in short or long-term application?
Well, Congress recently has been more on the short-term, temporary stimulus kinds of activities. The stimulus bill was intended to be a boost to the economy in the short run, which then would sort of run on its own. Our forecast would reflect that we don't believe that. So you'll see our expectations for growth were not actually stimulated by that activity. When we take our signals from what happened in the housing market when there was a temporary tax credit. So I'm the chairman of the House Price Forecast Committee for the company. So our advice to the executives of the company was there would be a temporary price rise, but that the market would take it all back and prices would continue to fall subsequent to that.
I hadn't intended to ask this question, but an $8,000 rebate basically was equivalent to a nothing down loan most of the time on those prices. How did that loan portfolio perform? Do we know?
No, we don't. We have not isolated those particular loans.
That might be interesting because that's in essence a nothing down program, only without spending the $8,000.
Well, yeah, and I'm pointed out to some of the bankers who had made loans under that program and held them in portfolio that the loan-to-value ratio they believed they had at the time they made the loan actually was higher after prices receded again, so they actually had more risk in their portfolio than they thought they did.
And I still think it'll come out very well.
I think it will, because we're close to the bottom.
Yeah, but you also probably created a payment that was less than rent.
Absolutely.
So,
full disclosure, I bought a house in Florida in last September. They were on sale.
Yeah, that's it. Eric, you wrote a book, The Post-Catastrophe Economy. And this is one of the many parts I've underlined in the book, the most underlined book I've ever read, actually. The United States will rebuild on its ethics of hard work, education, fairness, and honesty, its culture of entrepreneurial versus financial risk-taking, of competition, of savings, and of avoidance of debts, its core competencies in technology development and original invention, and its strong institution of property rights and rule of law. And I think it was your hope that we would have spent the last 2 years going forward and hopefully building infrastructure to a new set of tools, transportation, energy, communication, and infrastructure that you call, I don't know what you call it, TC?
Techie economy.
Techie, okay.
Not very catchy, but.
How are we doing?
I would say that we did not do that.
We did not do that.
I would characterize the policy that we took instead as print and pray.
Print and pray? I knew we were going to have one of them on the panel. All right. Print and pray.
So there was no concerted effort or no consensus on what to do beyond the emergency measures that were taken to halt the deflationary process and the recession.
And I think that's why I asked the question about fiscal policy, is that a long-term fiscal policy would not be short-term relief or pleasing. Is that possible? In other words, if we really did something long-term, the results would be out there a ways.
Well, if we approached it as a return on investment idea, that there's certain infrastructure that if you invest in it in a country, it increases your capacity for economic growth, and it's not an expense, not entirely, but there's a multiplier factor.
Okay.
But you have to think very carefully about how you do that, and it takes some planning, and it takes some execution, and in order to pull that off, you have to have enough of a consensus within government to not get into a dysfunctional argument about whether it's going to result in the short term in an increase in deficits.
Do we have the capacity to make that kind of, come to that conclusion?
Well, I think that, as Doug was mentioning, the American public was pretty aghast at the quality of the debate that was going on about the debt ceiling. It was not a particularly constructive discussion, and I think most Americans are very frustrated by that.
And I hadn't intended to ask this exactly, but there's a document that basically has a joint effort from Republicans and Democrats regarding the budget deficit and reducing it. And I'm just wondering, you've got a few people from each side poured their hearts into probably a year or two's worth of work, come to a pretty legitimate conclusion. How have each of those parties reacted to that document? Did they put their arm around them with, it's not everything we wanted, but we know we all have to sacrifice, or are they getting the stuffings kicked out of them from both sides? I'm just curious if anybody knows.
Well, I think that all these discussions are now so ideologically charged. It's very difficult to put anything forward. It's a simple constructive plan based on making just a simple factual argument, right, behind it. You very quickly get a dialogue that devolves into some argument about whether we're going to go bankrupt tomorrow, which is just not what's going to happen. So, yeah.
I agree. I think the roots are there for a good discussion. If you take Paul Ryan's plan,
yep.
And the President's Deficit Commission plan,
yep.
the two of those elements together could lead to a very constructive debate about how to make some long-term adjustments to your point, you're not going to fix it in 2 years. It's something that's going to take some time. But Washington just didn't engage with those as perhaps starting reference points.
Eric, you mentioned in the book something called an output gap.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is, and are we experiencing that, and what's the end result of that?
The concept of an output gap is the Congressional Budget Office every year puts out what they project is what the growth rate of the economy would be if everybody who wanted to have a job had a job. All the producers and consumers are acting as efficient actors in the market. And what happens is in a recession, so if you have a curve like this, it's the output normal growth rate. You have a recession, you have you're operating below that theoretical growth rate, and the difference is an output gap. Okay. And what it really means is that the real meaning of it is that it really is a measure of unemployment. Right? Okay. Because and when in the 1970s, the policy was to try to close the output gap by any means necessary, which is the wrong approach. We would wind up with a lot of inflation.
If you don't close the output gap, what ends up happening?
Well, the challenge is that the usual reflation measures, monetary policy, and fiscal policy for the last 30 years has been very effective at closing output gaps quickly after recessions. The problem is if we don't close it before the next recession, then we have what I call a mid-gap recession, which is another recession that opens the gap further that was left over from the previous recession. And we haven't had that since 1938. Okay. And that creates really significant add-on problems.
You see the likelihood of us having that?
I think it's feasible, but as Doug said, it would probably be caused by an external event, probably in Europe. Okay. You've mentioned the next 10 years of investing will not be like the last 10. So. Thank God. We created a portfolio in 2001 composed of treasury bonds and gold, which outperformed everything if you didn't do anything with it, which is a pretty dismal fact, right? It beat the S&P, both in terms of volatility, drawdown, batting average, everything you can think of. That's not good. So hopefully, over the next 10 years, we get back on track where we're growing the economy by growing our corporations, by growing the economy in a more organic fashion, not through finance.
Okay. One of your investments happens to be connected to apartments. So does real estate, in your opinion, do well in the environment that we're going to find ourselves in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, the particular investment is in a company that sells into B markets of residential real estate, multifamily residential real estate. And the theory behind it was that the cost of capital was going to remain low, but that rents were going to start to rise. And so cap rates are going to improve, and these are going to be profitable investments. Okay. So I think that's going to continue.
Last question for you. You talk about in the book that you wrote the concept of having public-private partnerships create this infrastructure. So when did we last do that successfully? And what type of infrastructure are you talking about that you think we need to do?
Well, we actually have not done that much in this country. It was much more popular. Well, in the early days, a lot of our highways were built with European money funding private enterprises to build our highways. And most people forget that. But we took the public route after World War II, and our infrastructure was largely built through public finance. But in Europe, where they didn't have any money, after the war, they used public-private partnerships for the most part to build their infrastructure, roads, highways, bridges, and so forth. Typically, that model is adopted in periods of time when governments are very constrained fiscally, and it becomes more efficient to combine private enterprise, market discipline of private enterprise, and the risk management of government to combine together to build infrastructure.
Okay. There was a $500 million loan, that's why I'm asking you if that was kind of an attempt to do that with Solyndra. Was that a partnership type of arrangement? I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying that can happen sometimes.
Well, one of the things I warn about in my book is that there's right ways and wrong ways to do public partnerships. The wrong way is basically getting public money and giving it to your buddies to go build things. That's kind of how they did it in the UK. You know? The right way to do it is to create a real competitive market where the partnerships actually have to compete with each other and perform to metrics, and they can't get another job unless the last one worked that well.
You know, one of the hardest things is that there seems to be a lack of credibility, to say the least, when you want to tax people more or you want to have partnerships and then you find out that the basis for that partnership was other than for a good reason. You get very suspicious about someone writing the next check or asking you to contribute more. And I don't know how we get away from that. I mean, I just don't know. And that's not a question, but it's a frustration.
I don't think it's any secret that most Americans are pretty frustrated with American campaign finance. And that's one of the first things we have to fix in this country.
Okay. Sean, you going to cause trouble tonight?
I thought maybe I was supposed to sit back down after introducing Eric, given that it's the economist.
No, you did good by there. Okay. In the past, there were common reasons for foreclosures. So what are the common reasons for foreclosures? And when you have them in every cycle.
Yeah, so I started investing in foreclosures in 2002, and one of the things that I had the hardest time with is that none of them made any sense. Everything had equity. All of these folks could sell. And I really struggled with this, especially as a son of a logic professor. And
that explains a lot.
Did you ever interview the people and go, why are you letting this happen?
Yeah, and so we finally, it finally dawned on me, and my partner helped me, kind of figure this out. But it was the 5 Ds, drugs, death, disease, divorce, and denial. And when you knocked on those doors, it was one of those 5 things. And again, this is 02 to 06. It's, there's equity everywhere. And, but those were the 5 things. And that's what I call the base rate of foreclosure. And that'll always be there.
Yeah, if you had them in 02 and 06, you're going to have them every time.
Right, it was every single time. It wasn't job loss because you could sell your house. It wasn't negative equity. It just didn't exist. So
this cycle, beyond 2006 to where we are now, what has been the added nitroglycerin that we have?
Well, I mean, your average property in California right now is $150,000 upside down by the time it hits foreclosure. So it's sold for $400, it's now worth $250. It's really an insurmountable debt. And if you look at the cost of repaying that debt over 30 years, it's really not practical or smart for anyone to consider trying to pay it. And I know there's moral issues around that, whatever a lot of people have, but it just doesn't make sense.
Well, what if let's try and solve it. So what would you do other than give everybody an instruction booklet to say, walk away? There was just an article, I'm constantly reading, so there was just an article about Fannie and Freddie not wanting to do principal reductions. Okay, and to me that makes sense because you've got ramifications to that, that are negative. What about giving somebody a principal-only payment until they break even with an appraisal? Does that make sense? I mean, I think you'd have people make that payment.
Does that happen in the life of the loan?
Well,
you're $150,000 upside down?
Well, I'm asking, if you have, we have a lot of people that are not current, but you have more people that are current in that situation. And I don't want to reward the group that's not made a payment for 2 years and get in an article saying this is wonderful. But the people that are making the payment, I think there might be an eventuality where it gets to them too, especially if the people that aren't making the payment get the goodies. But what if you just said willingly, for whatever it takes, 5% a year, you're going to pay principal down, so 25% in 5 years, you're back to square. I think you'd have a lot of people sign up for that, but I don't know if that's an acceptable suggestion to lenders. Since you're the only lender, Doug.
Well, I think that there's lots of things that are going to be explored, including principal write-down. I think there's a lot of momentum building in Washington toward that in particular. The difficulty has always been in the foreclosure space, and yes, there's a run rate of maybe $1 million, $1.5 million might be the typical run rate given the level of home ownership and the number of households there are. But the solutions have typically been one-on-one treatments. And the mortgage servicing business, when I was at the Mortgage Bankers Association, and they still do this study there, took apart the servicing operation, and there's about 17 elements to it, and 14 of those have very clear economies of scale. 3 of them have diseconomies of scale. Not just no economies, but they're actually more expensive as they get larger.
Okay.
One of those is taxes and insurance, so everybody outsources that because of all the local knowledge that you need about the jurisdictions. And the other 2 are default and foreclosure. So we wondered, were the diseconomies of scale sufficient to override all the other efficiencies in the servicing business? And now that experiment's been run, and we know that they are. The problem in solving it is that, and the reason that those diseconomies exist is that the treatments are a one-on-one kind of treatment. And you have to have quite a bit of experience in understanding the household's situation to determine whether or not you've got all the information, whether they fully understand the obligation, whether they're telling you about their willingness to pay, all of the resources that they have available to pay, their other commitments. So it's an intensive sort of one-on-one thing. I'd suggest that a program like that is something you would sit down and you would find some households that would be very effective under that kind of household, because you can determine they are willing to meet the commitment over a period of time, they have the resources that are available, and that they're willing to have all of that documented and make a commitment to that kind of program. There are others who you probably could put in that program that would not succeed because they don't have those criteria. The difficulty is in putting a broad-based policy or applying it to everyone is where you find the adverse selection kinds of problems.
How are you going to accomplish principal reduction without?
We're not proposing that.
Okay.
We're asking that same question.
That's your idea.
Because you have a bigger problem. Not only will you be not selecting some, you will also be not selecting completely the people that are current.
Well, the worst thing is I have to deal with my mother. When TARP was voted down the first time, she called me and she said, "Douglas," which means I'm in trouble.
Okay.
What are you doing with our money? We paid our mortgage. So when you do debt forgiveness, there's a whole bunch of people who have met all their obligations, and there are going to be losses. And while they weren't involved in the transaction, on the tax side of things, they're going to be involved in repairing the losses.
Right. For those of us that own free and clear houses, can we just get a check?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
That seems fair.
Problem solved.
Yes, John.
So I think that this idea that the foreclosure process is tough from a servicing standpoint is a self-inflicted wound. In California, I think there's actually a brilliant piece of policy here, which is that on a purchase money mortgage, right, there's no recourse. And I think this creates a really fair balance that resolves this issue and makes it very quick and easy to deal with somebody who's not paying.
That's why it only takes 600 days to foreclose in California.
It used to take.
It used to take,
150.
Exactly.
Right, and 150 days, right, is a lot of time to give somebody to try to work through their problems, sell the property, whatever they can do. And if they can't, they lose the home. And I think that's okay. And given that it's no recourse, I mean, compare it to most of the rest of the world, where you have significant, recourse. It can pass on to your children, right, the recourse. And here, you can walk away from the loan. And I also think it's a fair balance of risk with the lender, because the lender should take that loss. And I don't think it's fair to let that person stay in that house. They were they made a bad decision by buying that house at that price. They had plenty of folks giving them bad advice, a lot in the federal government, but they were part of it. They should lose their house, right? And the bank
I knew
should
he
take
wouldn't
their
disappoint
loss.
me.
And we should move forward. And it's not that tough.
Yeah.
And I do think that the losses that we're trying to prevent are multiplying. And you also are creating a whole group of people that feel very entitled to still stay there. When we buy foreclosures, as you know, we meet people at the door who may not have made a payment for 2 years, and the first sentence out of their mouth is, cash for keys. I mean, that's the expectation.
And every policy coming out of Washington is increasing that expectation that they should get to live in a home for free for the rest of their lives. Imagine when the government now owns all the rentals. I mean, you want to talk about rent control problems and having no future for real estate, that's the proposal that will kill real estate in the United States forever.
Well, one of the reasons why, and to be honest with you, I don't want hedge funds to own them for the same reason, is because it's uncertainty. If some gigantic company owns 10,000 rentals, I really don't know what to do with mine, because I don't know if the playing field is legit. I don't know if they're going to put 10,000 houses for sale, but as a builder, I certainly wouldn't carve up dirt waiting, because that risk is out there that they could be my competitor at a drop of a hat. So honestly, that's one of the reasons I'm hoping, and that's why we met, trying to say, give investors a shot at taking this inventory down, because it's manageable if we don't put it on the market. If we pull it off, it is manageable, yes.
So let me pose the answer to you as a question. And first I'll give you a little bit of background. So I come out of the venture capital industry, and a lot of folks in my industry put a lot of money into a lot of bad companies back in the late 90s, and then there was a crash, and they lost their money. So they took a big haircut, so they took write-downs, and of course it was equity, not debt-based. But the principle was pretty simple. They made bad investments, and they lost their money. So let's pose it to you as a question. I lend you $100,000, and I don't really bother to find out what your ability to pay is, and you stop paying me. Whose fault is that, mine or yours?
certainly would say the lender.
Yes. So
And-
this idea of debt forgiveness is a red herring, in my view.
One of the questions you asked was how do you fix things? From a purely market perspective, I'm all for letting the foreclosures work through the system, let the banks take the loss. The issue in Washington is that the public has poured a lot of money into Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and a lot of those losses are going to redound back onto taxpayers. So that's why you see the functions of the GSEs in terms of working at other options other than the principal write-down piece, which will, again, put those losses right back on taxpayers. Part of the reasons that we hosted the meeting with some folks here was to explore the investor option. We have a rule of no more than 10 loans to a single investor. In the course of the bubble, the homeownership rate got well ahead of what was sustainable, obviously. Those properties, there's not a broad-based program to tear those properties down. And so...
Despite what Mr. Greenspan...
You're right, exactly. Well, I actually made a public suggestion that would be a good idea in some areas and was labeled within the company Dozer Duncan. So I have a little bit of a scar on the back from that. I still believe it's a good idea in some metropolitan areas, so I'll liven that up again.
Just so you know, that actually happened in California with a brand new housing tract that we made a bid on. Something like 16 brand new homes. Someone sent me an email with a YouTube video. When I saw the housing, I went, boy, those look familiar. And I asked Greg, he says, yeah, those are the houses we just made a bid on. They tore down all of them. They were brand new. Anyway.
Well, the evidence from within our portfolio, from how we treat the properties, whether they're sold to owner-occupants, to investors, smaller investors, or to hedge funds, is that the loss severity is greater. You made a point earlier about selling to hedge funds or not. The loss severity on those loans is the greatest when you sell to that group. So that's why there's a lot of resistance to
Good. Glad to hear that. We have less than a minute before we're going to get our dessert break. Last question. Sean, if there's a $4 million red ball for the country, California, for all the people that are 90 days late all the way through REOs, do you have any idea what that number is?
Well, you have about 600,000 right now that are delinquent.
That far delinquent?
That are 90 days or more.
90 days or more,
yeah.
okay.
And
the
you've
reason
got another 200,000 that have had a notice of default or in the process of foreclosure, so about 800,000, but 2.4 million underwater.
Underwater owners, okay.
This was California.
And you're...
Yeah, it's about 25% of the total households and about 30% of those with a mortgage.
Okay.
1 out of 3.
And we sell 500,000 houses a year, and we have 800,000 now. You didn't say REOs, so...
We're cleaning up about, between short sales and foreclosures, we're cleaning up about 18,000 a month.
Okay.
And so with it's 5 years.
If you don't add
4 to
anything
5
to
years.
If you don't add anything to it?
If you don't add anything to it and the pace stays at the same, which, it's frankly amazing that our pace of sales has stayed as high as it has. And it clearly wouldn't have stayed this high without investors in California because repeat home buyers gone.
Yeah. All right. I feel like we're in the football world. We have a 1 minute warning. Well, thank you for our first half. I will now turn it over to Aaron, who will tell you the next step.
The next step is dessert. Spelled desert in your program. It's dessert. Don't worry.